My name is Lisa Sundqvist, and I work as a data manager and a project leader at SMHI. I work with marine environmental monitoring data, primarily with biological data. And I have been part of the SBDI and former LifeWatch work since I started at SMHI nearly 5 years ago. So I'm very happy that we now finally are launching this new infrastructure. And I will start with some background. SMHI have more than 100 years of experience of conducting marine environmental monitoring and handling the data it produces. So we collect, manage, and present data. And SMHI does monthly cruises from the West Coast to the Baltic, now using the new research vessel Svea. And on these cruises, we collect physical, chemical, and plankton data from the open sea. We are also national data hosts for oceanographic and marine biological data, not including fish data, that is SLU, and Malin will tell you more about that later. We are appointed data host by the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, and we archive, publish marine physical, chemical, and biological data collected within Swedish environmental monitoring program. And this means that we, as a data host, handle much more data than the one we collect ourselves. We are also, since 2017, appointed National Oceanographic Data Center, NODC, by UNESCO's IOC and IOD. And our database, as I think some of you know, is called SHARK, which is an acronym for Svenskt havsarkiv, Swedish Ocean Archive. And to get access to our data, we have Shark Web and Shark Data, where Shark Web is for manual filtering and downloading of the data, and Shark Data is an API, but it also has a simple web page for package downloading. And to give you an idea of the amount of data, at the moment we have about 1.3 million samples from 50,000 sampling points, 290,000 sampling events, and 7.3 million physical and chemical measurements and 4.4 million biological measurements. And before I go into details about export formats and file structures, I wanted to start talking a bit about Swedish environmental monitoring. And as Matthias mentioned in the introduction, Sweden have a long history of systematic environmental monitoring. And then now, when understanding the effects of global change is a top priority, we should be very thankful that these monitoring programs was initiated already a long time ago, because many of the Swedish monitoring time series are now starting to get quite long, and thus they are also very useful to study change over time. The Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, SIPA, and the Swedish Agency for Marine and Water Management, SWAM, so Hav- och Naturvårdsverket, are responsible for the Swedish environmental monitoring. And they are also responsible for the method descriptions, the so-called undersökningstyper, or recently actually renamed to övervakningsmanualer in Swedish. And this is the key to systematic monitoring, that all data are collected using the same methods, even if it's collected by different institutes and over many, many years. And in our data hostship, we have data collected according to 19 different methodologies, and of those, 17 are for biological data. And we have the following. We have bacterioplankton, chlorophyll, epibenthos, that's mostly macroalgae, but also macrofauna, phytoplankton, picoplankton, harbor seals, gray seals, ringed seals, harbor porpoise, seal pathology, sedimentation, zoobenthos, zooplankton, primary production, and physical and chemical data. And as you can see, the longest time series here are physical and chemical data, where we have measurements already from 1893. Unfortunately, the biological time series are not that long. Most of the programs started during the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The Swedish system with data hosts are important for the quality and not least the standardization of the data. And SIPA and SWARM appoint specific authorities and universities to be data hosts. And thus data are gathered in a few places close to the expertise. And even if it sometimes feels that we have a very long way left to go before we can say that the Swedish monitoring data is standardized and interoperable, working in international data projects, it is often my experience that Sweden have a very good accessibility and management of our data compared to many other countries. And I think the data hostship system is one reason for that. So data is received and maintained and stored and made available by the data hosts. And most data hosts have both a web page and an API for data access. And for a long time, the focus have been on gathering and publishing data so that all data should be freely available for everyone. And even if standardization is in the core of monitoring itself, the standardization of the data and the metadata is not as good as one could wish for, maybe. But during the last years, standardization between different data hosts has started to get more prioritized. And now the discussions are more about increasing quality controls, FAIR principle, making data not only accessible, but also interoperable to increase machine readability. But this is also something that increases the human readability a lot. And data hosts are working on standardizing data formats, even if many of the projects have shown to not be as easy tasks as and it's now clear that it's very difficult to standardize in retrospect. For instance, we have worked on a national station register for I think it's over 10 years now. And it's still not totally clear how to define a monitoring station. And this is after hours and hours of meetings. And projects on standardization, standardizing formats, codes, and terms are also initiated, but also working quite slowly. And here I think it's important to not only see the Swedish environmental monitoring data as a Swedish resource and instead have an international perspective. And here I also think that SBDI is very important since the data hosts are set to have a national focus. But SBDI can bring in a more international and more research focused perspective on the data. And with the experience of how difficult it is to standardize in retrospect, even within Sweden, I think it is important to take international standards into account from the beginning when possible. Because this is what it looks like, at least for us. And I guess it's the same for many of the other data hosts, that having access to a lot of data also leads to projects outside of the data hostship, both nationally and internationally. And in this context, it starts to get interesting to talk about formats, because standardized formats makes it so much easier, both as a data provider and a data receiver. And for biological data, we have had the Darwin Core format for quite a long time, and we have delivered occurrences in Darwin Core for many years, both within the LifeWatch project to the analytic portal and to the EU project eMonet Biology. But now we also have the event core and the extended measurements of fact to connect to the occurrences. And this is, in my opinion, a huge step forward, because it's only so much you can do with the occurrence data, and we have so much more information available connected to our occurrences. And in this picture, you can see an overview of the extended Darwin Core format that I took from the OBIS web page. And as you can see, you can fit quite a lot of information into this format. This is only one example. You can also use it, for example, for transect data. And here you can see that you can organize it by cruise or by station or by sample. And you can take subsamples where you can measure nitrate or grain size, for example. And you could have many occurrences, and to every occurrence, you can link biomass, abundance, body length, for example. And the very cool thing is that it makes it possible to download rich biodiversity data, including a lot of measurements and metadata from different organism groups and from different areas of the world, and analyze it together in the same format. And of course, it would be naive to think that analysis could be made straightforward. We will still have quite a lot of work ahead of us to make the data standardized, quality assured, and interoperable. I have been involved in some work within Emonet to make data products. And it's not that easy to work with data from different countries because you have to put quite a lot of effort into making the data homogeneous and to know that you actually have the same thing. But I really believe that the work that we do now will increase the usability of the treasure that is Swedish environmental monitoring data, both nationally and internationally. And I really hope that extended Darwin Core format will make it easier for researchers to include more data in their analysis in the future. And we have worked intensively with putting our data into the extended Darwin Core format this year. And we managed to get most of our information in here for the exports that we have prepared so far. But we are putting quite a lot of information into dynamic properties, meaning that the information does not fit into any of the standardized Darwin Core terms. But hopefully the number of available terms will increase in the future. And I actually really like that the format is both standardized and flexible at the same time. It makes it very easy to use. And we have worked on trying to make as an as automated Darwin Core generator as possible, so that we could update it easy when we change things in the database. And I won't go into details about the program here, but it's available on GitHub, and anyone who is interested in checking it out and or have any questions can, of course, are very welcome to do so and to contact us if you have any questions or suggestions. The generator is written in Python, and the information that needs to be changed when adjusting exports are saved into YAML files that can easily be edited on your computer or directly on GitHub. And I'm actually very happy with the structure that we have now. We started out using big Excel spreadsheets, trying to map all our columns to the Darwin Core terms, and it was not that easy to get a good overview. But this system works very well for us, at least, and it's easy to get the overview of what you're mapping. And here is a slide of our data divided into different packages, where the dark green packages are the ones we have delivered to GBIF and SBDI so far. And the light green ones are data we hopefully can deliver in the future. And the light blue ones are biological data that do not have species observations, so those cannot be put into the Darwin Core format. When delivering data, we have divided the packages into national monitoring and other kinds of data. And that is regional data, regional monitoring, recipient control monitoring, and project data. And the reason for this is that we have a better control of the methodology and the quality of the national data. And we have very good regional data as well, but we don't really have a good system to separate the ones with good quality from the ones with less good quality. So at least for now, we have done this separation between national and other kinds of data. And this is the packages we have delivered to GBIF so far. They are generated through our generator, and then we just upload them at the IPT. And the mapping and the metadata and everything is there from the beginning, so it's just to publish. So that's very easy. And when you here is you can see what the data looks like in the SBDI portal, and you get this very nice overview of the data set. And this description is a very good way to communicate with the user. And this is something that I sometimes miss in our own database, that we do not have a good way to in text tell someone something general about the data or the monitoring program. And I also think that this can be very useful if we use this text when we update the data. So for instance, if we 1 year have worked very much with the stations or done specific quality controls, that can be written here so that the user can clearly see what changes has been done. And at the portal, you also get this nice overview where you can see the distribution of the data. Here we have a phytoplankton data set, and you can see that we have data from 1983 and that the amount of data increased over the years. And we have data from all around the year, but most from spring and summer. And you can also see if you have any quality issues. Here, for instance, you have some names that are not recognized. And in this case, I think this is flagellates and unicells that are not determined. And you can also get an overview of the taxonomy of the data set. And then I just want to briefly show you what you get if you download the data. I won't go into details here, but you get these 5 files. And here you have just a small part of the event table. It contains a lot more columns than this, but here you get information like sample size, value, and event date, station, and plankton sampling method, and sampler type. And then we have the extended measurement of fact, where we have 7 taxa, and you have abundances and biovolume concentration for those. And then we also have the occurrence table, where you find information about the species that are linked to dune taxa and worms. And here you see one of these flagellates that are undetermined, and then we lack the links here. But this is just a small part of the data that contains much more than this. And if you were there on Tuesday, you already know all about this SBDI 4R work package. And if you missed that workshop, I think you can see it. It will be put on the webpage later. So we have, if you want to analyze the data, this package is available. I have not had time to work with this myself yet, but as I have understand it, the R package has not that much functionality available going outside of the occurrence records yet. But I really hope that this is something that we can develop in a near future. And that was all I had. So then I leave the floor to Malin, who will tell you a bit about SLU.
Yeah, my name is Malin Werner. I work at the Department of Aquatic Resources at SLU. We're shortly called SLU Aqua. And I just want to take the opportunity with this last slide in this presentation to tell you that there's also data on fish in SBDI. And we have done, the Department of Aquatic Resources, and before that, the Swedish Board of Fisheries have done systematic monitoring of fish for at least 50 years. But the data from there is in the sea is delivered to an international database. So for the moment, there is data on freshwater and coastal monitoring fish in SBDI, but the international surveys are mostly in the ICES website, but will be available in the SBDI portal too soon. And I wanted to add this that Lisa said about the event data, because when we do this monitoring, we actually are mostly focused on, as fish is a commercial product, we're mostly focusing on using the data for stock assessment. So we do a lot of other measurements like age and length and weight. So this way to also be able to show all these things in the extended format is really good for us. And the marine fish stocks, they are shared between different countries. So this actually started as international cooperation with this monitoring in the sea. So, and we will continue with that, but it's really nice to be able to also show this data in the Swedish context. So I just wanted to say that there's a lot of fish data in there, but there's more coming soon